The colored lights danced along the walls, blending with artificial smoke and the bittersweet scent of spilled alcohol seeping into the wooden floor. The Brooklyn apartment hosting the party was packed, a sea of overlapping voices and laughter echoing through the narrow hallways. Music pulsed from the speakers, a steady beat reverberating through my chest. People swayed, drinks in hand, their conversations merging into a blur of sound and movement. I twirled the red plastic cup in my hands absent-mindedly, the condensation slipping between my fingers. I had been listening, at least I thought I had, to the group of friends gathered around me, but I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting, my eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Emily. She had always been my safe place. Since the first day of college, when we had collided in the dorm hallway and laughed about how terrible we were at reading maps, she had been by my side. We spent late nights studying together, shared greasy takeout meals, and confided in each other during the worst of times. She was everything to me, but always within the boundaries of what friendship should be. At least, that was what I had convinced myself. But tonight, something felt off. From the moment we arrived, Emily had been watching me differently. It wasn't the usual warmth, the effortless ease we had always shared. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was something restless about her, like she was caught in a silent battle with herself. I saw the way she hesitated before speaking, how she clenched and unclenched her hands, as if bracing for something inevitable. I should have asked if she was okay. I should have acknowledged the way my stomach flipped every time her gaze lingered on mine. But instead, I pretended not to notice. Because noticing meant admitting something to myself I wasn't sure I was ready to face. And then suddenly she was there. Her fingers wrapped around my wrist, warm and firm, tugging me away from the group. My breath hitched at the contact, my pulse quickening as she pulled me toward a quieter corner of the room. Away from the noise, the people, the distractions. It was just us now, the tension between us palpable in the dim light. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice urgent, almost hesitant. I swallowed, suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were. The party around us melted into background noise. The music pulsed, the sound of laughter carried through the air, but in that moment, the only thing that mattered was her. She opened her mouth, and what she said next made the floor disappear beneath my feet. The words spilled from her lips too fast, as if she needed to force them out before she lost the courage to say them. "I like you." The world around us didn't stop, but inside me, everything ground to a halt. The music still pulsed, people still laughed. The party carried on without us, but none of it reached me. I could only hear the echo of her words, could only see the way her chest rose and fell unevenly as she waited for my response. I blinked, my heart hammering. "What do you mean?" My voice came out softer than I intended, barely audible over the noise of the party. Emily glanced away, biting her lip, her fingers curling into fists at her sides like she was bracing herself. "Not like a friend. Not like it's always been," she said, her voice quieter now, raw. "I like you in a different way." Something inside me cracked open, something I had buried so deep for so long that it almost hurt to acknowledge it. The background faded, the flashing lights, the hum of conversation, the bodies moving around us, until all that existed was the space between us. A space that suddenly felt too small, too charged, like the very air around us had shifted. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Emily was my best friend. My foundation. The one person I never had to question, never had to doubt. If I accepted her words, I had to accept that nothing between us would ever be the same again. That scared me more than anything. And yet, I wanted this. I had always wanted this. The realization came in a rush, so overwhelming that I almost staggered beneath the weight of it. Every late-night study session, every time our fingers brushed while reaching for the same takeout box, every moment when she laughed at something I said and my chest warmed in a way that had nothing to do with friendship, it had always been there. I had just refused to see it, but admitting it, that was something else entirely. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice, trying to untangle the storm inside me. "Emily, She shook her head quickly, stepping back as if she had already braced for rejection. "You don't have to say anything," she said, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. I had to tell you. I couldn't keep pretending." She turned then, disappearing into the crowd before I could stop her. Before I could make sense of the chaos she had just set loose inside me. And suddenly, the party didn't feel fun anymore. I let out a nervous laugh, the only defense mechanism I had left. "Emily, did you drink something different tonight?" She flinched, and the wounded look in her eyes made my stomach twist.
Don't do that.
"Don't turn this into a joke." "I'm not," I started, but the lie felt hollow even before it left my lips. Emily crossed her arms over her chest, her posture suddenly rigid. "Then say it. Say you've never thought about it. That you've never once looked at me and wondered." My mouth opened, but no words came out.
Because I had thought about it.
More times than I could count. It had lingered in the quiet moments, in the way I memorized the curve of her smile, in the warmth that spread through me whenever she pulled me into a hug that lasted a little too long. It had been there in late-night conversations that stretched until dawn, in the way my chest tightened when she dated other people, in the flutter of something unspoken when our hands brushed under the table. But saying it out loud meant stepping over a line I wasn't sure I could ever come back from. Emily exhaled sharply, her shoulders dropping as if she had already made peace with whatever answer I wasn't giving. "You don't have to say anything. I had to get it out. I couldn't keep pretending." She took a step back, and panic flared inside me. My mind screamed at me to stop her, to say something, anything, but my body refused to move. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving me standing there with a heart that suddenly felt too heavy in my chest. The party around me continued, unchanged. The music still thumped, people still laughed, but I couldn't hear any of it anymore. Because Emily had just changed everything. The days that followed were suffocating. I told myself I could move on, pretend like nothing had happened, but it was impossible. Emily was everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
She didn't text me.
Didn't call. Didn't show up at our usual coffee spot on Thursday, where we always spent hours talking about everything and nothing. The absence of her presence was deafening. I tried to push through, burying myself in routines, convincing myself that space was good. That maybe with enough time, things would settle. But each moment without her only solidified a terrifying realization. I didn't know how to exist without Emily by my side. The silence she left behind was unbearable. By the third day, I caved. I found myself outside her apartment, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the city's distant hum. My fingers hovered over the doorbell before I finally pressed it. The seconds stretched endlessly until, finally, the door opened. Emily stood there, her expression unreadable, but her eyes said everything. They were red-rimmed, tired, like she hadn't slept properly in days. A lump formed in my throat at the thought that I had done this to her. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She hesitated, gripping the edge of the doorframe as if she was deciding whether to let me in or shut me out forever. Then, with a small nod, she stepped aside, and I entered. The apartment was dimly lit, the glow of the city filtering through the window. It felt different, colder, more hollow, like the warmth that usually lived here had been drained away. Emily walked ahead of me, sinking onto the couch with a heavy sigh, rubbing at her temples. "I didn't want to ruin everything," she murmured, staring at the coffee table instead of me. I sat beside her, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel cornered, but close enough that she'd know I wasn't running anymore. "You didn't ruin anything." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Then why did you leave me standing there? Why did you look at me like I was a stranger?" I swallowed hard, guilt settling in my chest like a stone. There were 100 excuses I could have given her. I was shocked, I needed time, I was afraid. But none of them mattered. None of them would make up for the hurt I had caused. "Because I feel the same way," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just didn't know how to handle it." Emily finally looked at me then, her brows furrowing in disbelief.
"What?"
I inhaled deeply, forcing myself to meet her gaze. I like you, Emily, more than I've ever let myself admit. And that scares me, because if we cross this line, we can't go back. And I was terrified of losing you. A long silence stretched between us. For a moment, I thought she would tell me I was too late, that I had ruined my chance. But instead, her shoulders sagged, and something unreadable flickered in her expression. Relief, maybe. Or something deeper. Maybe we don't need to go back, she whispered. Maybe we just need to figure out where we go from here. And for the first time in days, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide with surprise.
What?
I swallowed hard, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. I like you, Emily. I think. I always have. But admitting it meant accepting that things would never be the same. Her breath hitched, her fingers tightening against the fabric of her hoodie. Maybe they won't be the same, she murmured, leaning in just slightly. But maybe they'll be better. The air between us grew thick with unspoken words, with years of feelings neither of us had dared to acknowledge. Every moment we had ever shared, every touch, every lingering glance, it had all been leading to this. Time seemed to slow, the weight of our confessions settling between us like something fragile but inevitable. I didn't think. I didn't analyze. I didn't let fear win this time. I kissed her. At first, it was hesitant, soft, as if we were both testing the waters of something we had only ever imagined. But then she responded, her hands sliding at my arms, fingers threading into my hair, pulling me closer. A quiet gasp left her lips, swallowed by the warmth of my mouth against hers. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, the kind of moment that rewired everything I thought I knew about myself. I felt her sigh against me, her body melting into mine like she had been waiting for this as long as I had. It wasn't just a kiss. It was years of longing, of mischances, of unspoken truths crashing together in a single moment. And it terrified me. I pulled back first, my forehead resting against hers, both of us breathless. Emily's eyes searched mine, her fingers still tangled in my hair, holding me in place as if afraid I might run again. "Tell me you don't regret that," she whispered. I let out a shaky laugh, pressing my lips together before shaking my head. I don't know where we go from here." Her thumb brushed against my cheek, her touch so gentle it sent a shiver down my spine. "Then let's figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. Just us." My chest ached at how easy she made it sound, how willing she was to take this step with me despite everything. And for the first time since that night at the party, I let myself believe we could. "Okay," I whispered, closing my eyes as I leaned into her touch. Together. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. The kiss started soft, hesitant, as if we were both testing the limits of this new reality. A slow, careful unraveling of all the emotions we had spent years suppressing. But as Emily's fingers threaded deeper into my hair and my hands found the curve of her waist, hesitation melted into something deeper, something inevitable. Her lips moved against mine with a quiet urgency, a hunger that neither of us had been willing to acknowledge until now. The warmth of her body pressed against me, her breaths mixing with mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, nothing felt uncertain. Nothing felt like a mistake. When we finally pulled apart, our breaths shallow and unsteady, she let out a soft laugh, her forehead resting against mine. That was unexpected. I smiled, still feeling the ghost of her lips on mine. Not more unexpected than you pulling me aside in the middle of a party to confess your love. She rolled her eyes, but her laughter filled the space between us, easing the lingering tension. I panicked. It just felt like if I didn't say it then, I never would. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, my fingers lingering against her skin. "And now?"
How do you feel now?
Emily sighed, her expression turning more serious. Scared. Relieved. Like I just risked everything, but somehow it was worth it. I nodded, understanding completely.
Yeah.
It was. We sat there for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle, our hands still loosely intertwined. This wasn't just a moment. It was a shift, a quiet but irreversible change in everything we had known. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run from it. Emily squeezed my hand gently. "So, what now?" I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Now, we take it one step at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just us." Her lips curled into a smile, her fingers tightening around mine. Just us. I liked the sound of that. And as I looked at her, really looked at her, I realized I had never been more certain of anything in my life. Things didn't change overnight. There were still doubts, insecurities, conversations that hadn't happened yet. But the fear of losing Emily was greater than the fear of taking a chance on something new. In the weeks that followed, we navigated this delicate transition together. We learned what it meant to be us, beyond friendship, beyond everything we had known before. Some days felt effortless, like this had always been meant to happen. Other days were more complicated, filled with second-guessing and unspoken worries. But through it all, we never let go of each other. There were moments of clarity, like the first time we walked through campus holding hands, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Or the night we stayed up talking about all the times we had secretly wanted this but had been too afraid to admit it. And then there were the small, quiet things. The way Emily would reach for my hand absent-mindedly. The way I found myself memorizing every detail of her face like I hadn't already done it 1,000 times before. But the biggest moment came one lazy Sunday morning. We were sitting across from each other in our favorite cafe, the same place where we had spent countless afternoons as just best friends. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden hue over her skin as she stirred her coffee, her expression lost in thought. I watched her, really watched her, and something inside me settled. She glanced up, catching my gaze, a soft smile playing on her lips. "What?" I shook my head, returning her smile. "Nothing. Just thinking." She raised an eyebrow, setting her cup down. "Thinking about what?" I hesitated, then reached across the table, lacing my fingers through hers. How I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Her expression softened, and she squeezed my hand gently. "Me neither." And that was all we needed. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just that quiet understanding between us, that whatever this was, whatever it would become, we were in it together.
And you?
Have you ever had a moment where everything changed in a single second? What would you do if your best friend said something that could alter everything?